The first person that saw Daniel's body screamed so loudly neighbors rushed out of their apartments. Within minutes, the entire street was crowded. Police arrived and ambulance followed. Church members began showing up one after another as the news spread online. Nobody could believe it. Daniel was dead. The pastor's personal assistant, the same young man always seen beside the pastor during crusades, conferences, and international programs. Now, police tape surrounded his apartment building while members stood outside crying and whispering nervously. Then somebody said quietly, "They said he had an argument with Pastor 3 nights ago." Another member responded quickly, "Be careful what you say." But the whisper had already started spreading because recently people had begun noticing strange things around the church, not openly, quietly. The church grew fast and Daniel was the pastor's shadow. He handled travels and the private meetings. He was the most loyal worker in the ministry, but slowly his heart became heavy. He started noticing things that did not look like God. Strange visitors coming to the office at night, sudden instructions that certain areas inside the church building should never be entered, the pastor dismissing workers unusually early but remaining behind alone for hours. Daniel ignored all of it because loyalty blinded him, until things started affecting him personally. His life began to change. His peace disappeared. He felt a strange darkness following him everywhere. Then the dream started. He saw the church auditorium covered in darkness. He saw the pastor touching the members, but instead of blessings, he saw black shadows moving into them. Daniel woke up sweating. After that night, the dreams kept coming, and around the same period, strange tension quietly started growing inside the church. One Sunday during laying of hands, a woman suddenly screamed loudly the moment the pastor touched her forehead. "Snake! There is a snake behind him!" The pastor called it a spirit of confusion. The people laughed at the woman, but Daniel did not laugh because for 1 second, he saw the shadow too. After that service, Daniel started paying attention more carefully, and the more he observed, the more unsettled he became. One evening, after a miracle service, the pastor instructed everyone to leave the church office early. But about 20 minutes after driving home, Daniel realized he forgot an important document the pastor needed for an international trip the next day, so he turned back immediately. When he returned to the church compound, most lights were already off, but light still came from the restricted office wing, and Daniel approached quietly. He noticed unfamiliar cars parked behind the building. His heart tightened slightly. Then he heard voices from inside one of the offices. One voice belonged to the pastor. The others were unfamiliar. Then he heard something that made him freeze. The second sacrifice delayed things too much. Silence followed. Then another voice responded coldly. "But the power has increased." Daniel's breathing became uneven. Sacrifice? What were they talking about? Then another statement came. The next one must not fail. Fear crept into him immediately. Slowly, he moved closer towards the partially opened office door, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Candles burned across the floor. Strange symbols covered a large table. Several men sat quietly wearing dark clothing. Then Daniel saw the pastor standing among them while one of the men spoke to him. Then suddenly, one of the men turned towards the door sharply. Daniel jumped backward instantly. His heart pounded. He turned and hurried out before anyone saw him fully. The next morning, the pastor called him privately. The atmosphere inside the office felt strange immediately. The pastor stared at him calmly for several seconds. "You came back to church last night?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Yes, sir. I forgot your travel file." The pastor nodded slowly, then smiled faintly. "You should be more careful moving around at night." Something about the statement unsettled Daniel deeply. 2 days later, Daniel requested a private meeting. His hands trembled slightly as he sat down. The pastor looked at him patiently. "What is it?" Daniel struggled for words. Finally, he said quietly, "I want to resign." The pastor leaned back slowly. "Why?" Daniel looked down briefly, then finally spoke. "You were not like this before, sir." The pastor's face hardened slightly. Daniel continued softly. "I remember when you truly prayed. I remember when ministry felt pure." Pain filled his voice. "What happened to you, sir?" The room became silent. Then the pastor sighed deeply. "You are allowing people to poison your mind." "No, sir." "Then why are you speaking like this?" Daniel's eyes became watery. "Because my spirit has not been at peace around you for a long time." The pastor stood up slowly. "After everything I have done for you." His voice became quieter. "You want to leave me too?" Daniel looked torn emotionally because despite everything, he still loved him, still respected him, still wanted to believe he was wrong. Then suddenly, while the pastor walked past him, Daniel noticed a partially opened inner room. Inside were candles, photographs, red cloth, and what looked like dried blood on the floor. Fear exploded inside him instantly. The pastor noticed where he was looking. Then slowly, he smiled. A cold smile Daniel had never seen before. Daniel stood up immediately, his body trembling. That same night, neighbors heard strange movement from his apartment. The next morning, Daniel was dead. Daniel's funeral was filled beyond expectation. Church members wept openly. But beneath the tears and tributes, something else was moving quietly through the church. Fear. People whispered in corners. He was healthy. I still spoke with him that evening. Something about his death is strange. But anytime those conversations started, others shut them down aggressively. Be careful what you say against the man of God. Do you know who pastor is globally now? Stop letting the devil plant suspicion in your heart. That division slowly spread through the church. Some people became uncomfortable. Others became more loyal than ever. And somehow, despite everything, the church kept growing even bigger. New members flooded in weekly. People traveled from different countries just to attend one service. The pastor's miracle went viral constantly online. Clips of healings gathered millions of views. Soon, invitations started pouring in from abroad. The pastor traveled constantly. London, South Africa, Canada, Dubai. Everywhere he went, crowds followed him. Money increased, influence increased, fame exploded. But privately, darkness was tightening its grip around his life. 2 years after Daniel's death, the cult demanded another sacrifice. This time, his second son. The pastor broke down immediately. "No," he said repeatedly. "Not again." But the man remained unmoved. "You already belong to us." For days, fear tormented him. But eventually, he gave in. 3 weeks later, his second son suddenly fell sick. No previous illness, no warning. Within 3 days, the young man was dead. Doctors could not explain what happened. The family was shattered. But something changed completely inside the pastor afterward. He became emotionally numb. Yet publicly, his ministry kept exploding. Miracles increased. People called him a man carrying unusual power. But inside his home, peace disappeared completely. His wife started noticing strange things after the second son's death, but she ignored them. Then one afternoon, one of her close friends visited quietly. They sat together in the living room discussing the recent tragedy. Suddenly, the woman lowered her voice carefully. "Have you noticed something strange about your son's death?" The pastor's wife frowned immediately. "What do you mean?" Her friend hesitated. "Both of them died suddenly. No medical explanation. And both reportedly vomited blood before dying." The pastor's wife sat upright instantly. "What kind of nonsense is that?" Her voice became sharp. "Stop bringing fictional drama into real life." The friend quickly apologized, But after she left, the words refused to leave her mind. That was when she started remembering things. After the first son died, strange shadows moved around the house for days. After the second died, the exact same thing happened again. Suddenly, her heart became troubled, and for the first time in years, she started observing her husband carefully. The strange silence around him, the coldness, the emotional emptiness. Fear slowly entered her heart. One afternoon, while the pastor traveled for a conference, she searched the entire house secretly. Every room, every cupboard, every hidden space she could think of. She searched desperately for anything suspicious, ritual items, strange objects, anything, but she found nothing. Still, her spirit remained troubled. One evening, she finally confronted her husband. "Why did our sons die like that?" The pastor looked at her quietly. "What kind of question is that?" She struggled emotionally. Something doesn't feel right. The pastor's expression changed immediately. "Death is inevitable," he replied coldly. "God gives life and takes it anytime he wants." Then he started quoting scriptures calmly. The pastor's wife became quiet, ashamed for even suspecting him. Slowly, she buried the thoughts again, but not completely, because after that conversation, the dreams started. Terrible dreams. Sometimes, she saw herself lying inside a coffin. Other times, she dreamed she was vomiting blood endlessly, while people stood around watching helplessly. She woke up terrified almost every night. Her peace disappeared completely. Soon, she realized something else too. Her prayer life had died long ago, somewhere between fame, luxury, and becoming known globally as Mama. She had drifted far from God personally. That realization broke her emotionally. One night, she locked herself inside her room and cried deeply while praying for mercy. Then she started fasting secretly, praying constantly, asking God for direction. But strangely, only one name kept entering her mind repeatedly: Mrs. Grace. At first, she ignored it, but the name kept coming back again and again. Soon, memory started returning clearly. Mrs. Grace refused the laying of hands. Mrs. Grace suddenly leaving the church, and something else she had never noticed before. Her husband no longer laid hands on her, either publicly or privately. That realization unsettled her badly. Slowly, dots began connecting inside her mind. Then shame entered her heart, because she remembered how she mocked Mrs. Grace years earlier. She never checked on her, never defended her, never questioned why she left. Yet now, her spirit kept pushing her towards the same woman. Their dreams became worse afterward. One night, she saw her own burial. She woke up screaming, her body shaking violently, and immediately she heard it clearly inside her spirit: "Go to Mrs. Grace." Fear gripped her instantly. That same Saturday evening, she drove straight to Mrs. Grace's mansion, trembling with fear. Before Mrs. Grace could even speak, the woman fell to her knees crying, "I am sorry." Her voice shook badly. Mrs. Grace stood still, quietly staring at her. But she was no longer seeing only the woman kneeling before her. Spiritually, she saw something else: death. Heavy darkness surrounded her like a shadow. Then suddenly, her spiritual eyes opened deeper, and what she saw made her heart sink instantly. Another sacrifice was already underway. The pastor had been seeking a higher position and greater power inside the cult, and this time, his wife was the requirement. Mrs. Grace opened her eyes immediately. "Who knows you came here?" she asked quickly. The pastor's wife wiped her tears. "Nobody." Without wasting time, she held the woman's hand. "We need to pray now." The atmosphere inside the house changed immediately. That night, they prayed for hours, not casually, desperately. Mrs. Grace prayed fiercely for mercy and protection. Neither of them realized how late it had become until Mrs. Grace checked the time, 11:47 p.m. The pastor's wife checked her phone. 30 missed calls. Fear gripped her instantly. "I should call him back," she whispered nervously. Immediately, something inside her resisted it strongly. At the same time, Mrs. Grace suddenly heard clearly in her spirit, if she returns home tonight, she will die. Her heart skipped instantly. Mrs. Grace looked at her seriously. "You're not leaving this house." The pastor's wife froze. Something in Mrs. Grace's voice made fear rise inside her immediately. That same night, the pastor sat alone inside his private study, staring silently at his wife's unanswered calls. His face showed no emotion anymore, only stillness, cold stillness. Then slowly, he closed his eyes, and instantly, he saw where she was, Mrs. Grace. The moment he sensed her location spiritually, anger flashed across his face briefly. Not loud anger, something darker, obsessive, dangerous. And from that moment, the attacks intensified. The first night, the pastor's wife woke up screaming after seeing herself buried alive in a dream. The second night, strange movements started happening inside the guest room. Footsteps, knocks, whispers. Sometimes the light flickered suddenly during prayer. Other times, the atmosphere became so heavy, breathing felt difficult. Fear slowly started breaking the pastor's wife emotionally. More than once, she begged Mrs. Grace, "Maybe I should go back home." But each time, Mrs. Grace refused firmly. No. One night during prayer, the pastor's wife suddenly collapsed violently on the floor. Mrs. Grace rushed towards her immediately. Her body had become ice cold. "Madam!" No response. Mrs. Grace shook her repeatedly. Nothing. Fear entered her instantly. Then she checked her breathing. Her heart nearly stopped. There was none. The pastor's wife was dead. Mrs. Grace staggered backward in shock. "No, no, no!" Her voice trembled. "No, God, no!" For the first time in years, fear almost overwhelmed her faith completely. She dropped to her knees immediately and started praying desperately. Nothing happened. She quoted scriptures, prayed louder, cried louder. Still nothing. The body remained cold and lifeless. Minutes passed. Nothing changed. Then suddenly, Mrs. Grace became quiet. Deep inside, she heard one instruction clearly. "Praise me." She froze. Praise? At a moment like this? But the instruction came again. "Praise me." Tears filled her eyes immediately. Slowly, she began worshiping through tears. Her voice shook at first, then gradually, the atmosphere inside the room started changing. At that exact same moment, far away inside the hidden ritual gathering, the final sacrifice was about to be completed. Candles burned across the room. Dark chants filled the atmosphere. The pastor stood silently among them. Then one of the courtmen called the pastor's wife's name aloud for the final invocation. Suddenly, fire exploded violently in the middle of the gathering. The men screamed instantly. The candles scattered. Chaos erupted. Some of them fell backward in fear. Then one voice shouted angrily, "Who brought fire into this ritual?" Back inside Mrs. Grace's mansion, the pastor's wife suddenly jerked violently on the floor, then gasped for breath. Mrs. Grace froze completely. The woman coughed hard repeatedly before bursting into tears. Alive. She was alive. The cult was furious. The moment the sacrifice failed, the atmosphere inside the gathering turned violent immediately. One of the men pointed directly at him. "You brought fire against us." Another voice thundered angrily, "You have become a liability." The pastor fell to his knees instantly, begging, But nobody listened. Then finally, one of them spoke coldly. "If we cannot have her, then we will take you." The pastor's body went cold instantly. 3 days later, the sickness started. At first, it looked minor. Weakness, dizziness, sleepless nights. His body became weaker daily. Doctors ran tests repeatedly but found nothing. No disease, no infection, nothing medically wrong. Yet, the pastor looked like a man dying slowly from the inside. Still, church services continued publicly. Crowds still gathered. Online followers kept increasing. Nobody knew the famous pastor was secretly collapsing. Meanwhile, inside Mrs. Grace's house, the pastor's wife finally began writing everything down carefully. Dates, death, patterns, experiences. She planned to expose everything publicly. Sometimes while writing, she would suddenly stop and cry, remembering her sons. The more she remembered, the more broken she became. Meanwhile, the pastor had become almost unrecognizable physically. His eyes lost life. Fear consumed him constantly. At night, he barely slept. Sometimes, he heard strange whispers calling his name repeatedly inside the darkness. Other times, he woke up feeling like unseen hands were choking him. The same fear he once used to control people had now imprisoned him completely, and for the first time in many years, he finally became sober. Not spiritually proud, just broken. He dragged himself out of bed weakly and fell to the floor crying, "God, please forgive me." Tears poured down his face uncontrollably. He remembered everything. The first time he compromised, the first ritual, the first lie, the first innocent member he manipulated. Then his sons, his family, his personal assistants. Everything crashed into him at once emotionally. Then suddenly, he heard a voice clearly in his spirit. "Confess." His eyes opened immediately. Confess? No, impossible. How could he stand before millions of people and destroy everything publicly? The shame alone would kill him. So instead, he kept praying privately for mercy, but the voice kept returning constantly. Confess. One night, the cult appeared to him again spiritually. This time, they gave him a terrifying warning: 7 days. That was all he had left. Fear consumed him completely. Meanwhile, the pastor's wife finished writing the entire exposure document. Everything was ready. She planned to send it to major media houses the next morning. That same night, the pastor sat alone inside his office. Memories flooded his mind. The early days when he genuinely loved God. The days before greed entered him. The days before impatience ruined him. Tears rolled down his face silently. Then once again, the voice came. What will it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? He broke completely. That Sunday morning, church members filled the massive auditorium, expecting another powerful service. The choir sang passionately. Cameras rolled. Online viewers connected live from different countries. Nobody noticed how weak the pastor looked as he slowly walked towards the altar. Members stood cheering loudly. The pastor stood quietly behind the pulpit, staring at the crowd. Thousands of faces looking at him with admiration, trust, reverence. Then suddenly, he dropped the microphone. The entire church became confused immediately. Slowly, he knelt down on the altar. Silence spread across the auditorium. Then the pastor began crying. At first, members thought he was overwhelmed spiritually. Some people started praying loudly. But then he spoke. "I have lied to all of you." The church froze instantly. The pastor lifted his head slowly, tears pouring down his face. "Everything you believed about me," his voice cracked badly, "was built on darkness." People looked at each other confused. Then he started confessing everything: the cult, the sacrifices, the manipulations, the fierce sermons, the laying of hands, how virtues were stolen spiritually, how people were used, how greed destroyed him. The auditorium exploded in chaos immediately. Some people screamed, others burst into tears. Several members stood up angrily, shouting. Others rushed towards exit immediately. Online viewers flooded the live comments in shock. Panic spread everywhere. Meanwhile, inside Mrs. Grace's house, the pastor's wife sat with a laptop open, preparing to send the exposure document. Then suddenly, her phone started vibrating non-stop. She looked down. The pastor was trending everywhere online. Confession videos had already flooded social media. She froze completely. Mrs. Grace quietly looked at the screen beside her. The pastor was still kneeling on the altar, crying before the entire church, completely broken. By the next morning, the massive auditorium was empty. The workers disappeared. The assistant pastors vanished. The members who used to defend him were now silent. The man who traveled with escorts was now completely alone. But his greatest battle was just beginning. The cult came for him. He saw dark figures standing around his bed, calling his name. At Mrs. Grace's house, the pastor's wife was broken. But while praying, Mrs. Grace heard a voice in her spirit. Pray for him. He is about to die. That same night, the pastor lay on the floor gasping for breath. The lights went out. Fear gripped him instantly, and immediately he saw them, dark figures standing across the room silently. His body started shaking violently. No, please. One of the figures stepped forward. You betrayed us. The pastor burst into tears immediately. I confessed. I chose God. The voice replied coldly. You belong to us first. At that exact moment, Mrs. Grace and pastor's wife began to pray. The battle was fierce. The pastor's wife cried for mercy for the man who destroyed her family. Mrs. Grace prayed with authority against the darkness. Hours passed. The pastor began to cough up blood. His chest tightened. He was slipping away. Suddenly, at dawn, the atmosphere changed. Peace entered the room. The shadows vanished. The oppression lifted. The pastor took a deep breath. The voices were gone. The fear was gone. He knew he had been spared, but he was not restored because everything he built was gone. The ministry collapsed. The friends disappeared. And worst of all, his wife left him, not out of hatred, but because too much damage had been done, too much blood, too much deception, too much pain. And alone inside his room that day, the pastor finally understood one terrifying truth. The devil gives quickly, but collects slowly and mercilessly. He wanted power faster than God's process and lost everything trying to keep it. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you want to see more stories of light overcoming darkness, watch this next video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.